The air in the boardroom of Ventura Holdings was colder than a grave, but Adrian Cross didn't notice the chill. He was too busy enjoying the taste of his own power. He stood at the head of the mahogany table, looking down at his wife Charlotte, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He thought he was holding all the cards. He thought today was the day he finally cut the dead weight and seized total control of the empire. He was about to publicly fire his own wife. But Adrian had made a fatal miscalculation. He didn't realize that the woman sitting silently across from him wasn't just his employee. She was his executioner. And by the time the clock struck 10, he wouldn't just be out of a job, he would be erased. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Ventura Tower in downtown Chicago, turning the building into a pillar of fire. On the 45th floor, Adrian Cross adjusted his silk tie in the reflection of his office window. It was a Brioni Italian silk, costing more than most of his junior analysts made in a month. "You look tense," a voice purred from the doorway. Adrian turned. Sienna Blake, the vice president of marketing, and the woman currently warming his bed on Tuesday and Thursday nights, leaned against the doorframe. She was sharp angles and ambition, dressed in a crimson power suit that screamed for attention. "Not tense," Adrian corrected, smoothing his lapels. "Ready? Today is the day, Sienna. I'm finally doing it." Sienna walked over, picking a piece of invisible lint off his shoulder. "Firing Charlotte." "In front of the entire board, isn't that a bit, theatrical? Even for you." "It has to be public," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a cold, hard register. "If I fire her privately, she'll run to her lawyers. She'll try to claim spousal abuse or wrongful termination. But if I do it in the boardroom, citing gross incompetence and breach of fiduciary duty, the board will back me. She'll be humiliated. She'll sign the divorce papers just to make the noise stop." "And the shares?" Sienna asked, her eyes gleaming. "The prenup is ironclad, or so she thinks. Once she's out of the company, I trigger the buyout clause. I take her 15% for pennies on the dollar. Then combined with my 30%, I have controlling interest. Ventura Holdings becomes Cross Enterprises." It was a plan 3 years in the making. Adrian had married Charlotte 3 years ago, not for love, but for proximity. Charlotte was the daughter of the late founder William Ventura. She was quiet, unassuming, and frankly Adrian thought a bit dim. She spent her time in the charitable foundation wing of the company organizing galas and signing checks for orphanages. She had no head for business. She was a relic of a softer era. Adrian, on the other hand, was the shark the company needed. He had tripled profits by slashing benefits, outsourcing production, and cutting corners that William Ventura never would have touched. "She's here," his assistant buzzed over the intercom. Adrian checked his Rolex. 8:55 a.m. "Send her to the boardroom. Tell her the meeting starts in 5 minutes. He looked at Sienna. "Go take your seat. Don't look at me until it's done." Sienna smirked and left. Adrian took a deep breath. He felt invincible. He grabbed the file folder on his desk, the one labeled Termination Protocol C, Cross, and marched out of his office. Down the hall, Charlotte Cross walked slowly toward the boardroom. She wore a simple navy dress, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She carried nothing but a small, worn leather notebook. "Good morning, Mrs. Cross," a junior secretary stammered as she passed. Charlotte offered a small, sad smile. "Good morning, Jessica. How is your mother recovering?" "Oh, she's much better, thank you for asking," Jessica said, surprised that the CEO's wife remembered. Charlotte nodded and kept walking. She knew what was coming. She had known for weeks. Adrian wasn't as subtle as he thought he was. The late-night texts, the hushed phone calls, the sudden audits of her department. He was building a case. She paused at the heavy double doors of the boardroom. Her hand hovered over the brass handle. She felt a flutter of nausea, but she pushed it down. She remembered what her father, William, had told her on his deathbed. Be a wolf in sheep's clothing, Charlie. Let them think you are weak. Let them think you are foolish. And when they bare their throats to bite, that is when you strike. She pushed the doors open. The boardroom was a cavern of glass and steel. 12 members of the board sat around the oval table. These were men and women of industry sharks, in their own right. There was old man Henderson, who had been with the company since the 80s and hated Adrian's aggressive tactics. There was David Thorne, no relation to the forbidden name, a tech mogul who only cared about stock prices. And there was Sienna sitting at Adrian's right hand, tapping a gold pen against the table. Adrian stood at the head of the table. He didn't sit. He wanted to loom. Charlotte, Adrian said, his voice projecting a fake warmth that chilled the room. So glad you could join us. Please take a seat. He gestured to a chair at the far end of the table, the position of least power. It was isolated away from the microphone, away from the screen. Charlotte sat. She placed her hands on the table, clasping them together. She didn't open her notebook. She just looked at him. Her eyes were a piercing green, usually warm, but today they were flat like a calm sea before a hurricane. We have a packed agenda today, Adrian announced, addressing the room. But first, we must address a cancer that has been growing within this organization, a weakness that threatens our quarterly projections and our very stability. The board members exchanged glances. Henderson frowned, cleaning his spectacles. As CEO, Adrian continued, pacing the length of the room, it is my duty to make the hard choices, even the personal ones, especially the personal ones. He stopped directly behind Charlotte's chair. He didn't touch her. The Ventura Foundation, Adrian said, spitting the name out like a curse word. For the last 2 years, it has hemorrhaged money. Millions of dollars diverted to causes that offer zero return on investment. While we are trying to streamline operations, the director of the foundation has been approving grants without oversight. He walked back to the head of the table and slammed the file folder down. This is a report from our internal audit team. It details gross mismanagement of funds. It details incompetence on a staggering scale. The director of the foundation has failed to file proper tax documentation for 3 consecutive quarters, putting this entire company at risk of an IRS audit. Adrian paused for effect. The director of the foundation is, as you all know, my wife, Charlotte Cross. A murmur went through the room. Sienna feigned shock, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. Adrian, Henderson spoke up, his voice gravelly. Is this necessary? Surely this can be handled in a closed session. Charlotte is an employee, Adrian snapped, slamming his hand on the table. Nepotism ends today, Henderson. We are a Fortune 500 company, not a family picnic. If any other employee had cost us $4 million in potential fines, they would be escorted out by security. Why should she be different? Because she shares my bed. He looked at Charlotte with a sneer, although lately she hasn't been doing much of that either. The insult hung in the air, gross and unprofessional. Several board members looked down at their papers, uncomfortable. Charlotte remained perfectly still. She didn't blush. She didn't cry. She just watched him. Therefore, Adrian said, buttoning his jacket as if the matter was settled, I am putting forth a motion for the immediate termination of Charlotte Cross from her role as director of the Foundation and her removal from the board of directors effective immediately. I also move to trigger the incompetence clause in her shareholder agreement, forcing a mandatory buyback of her stock options. He looked around the room, daring anyone to defy him. All in favor? Sienna's hand shot up instantly. Aye. Two of Adrian's cronies' younger executives he had brought in from his old hedge fund raised their hands. Aye. Aye, another said. Henderson kept his hand down. Nay. This is a witch hunt, Adrian. 4 votes to 1, Adrian gloated. He looked at the other 7 members. Well, do you want stock prices to tank because we're harboring incompetent management? This is business. Slowly, reluctantly, 3 more hands went up. They were afraid of him. They knew Adrian could ruin careers. 7 votes. Adrian smiled. Motion carried. He turned his full attention to Charlotte. The triumph was intoxicating. He felt like a gourmand. Charlotte, he said, his voice dropping to a mock sympathetic whisper. You're fired. Please hand over your security badge and your company phone. Security is waiting in the lobby to escort you out. The room was dead silent. Everyone looked at the woman at the end of the table. They expected tears. They expected a scene. They expected her to beg. Instead, Charlotte unclasped her hands. She reached into her pocket, but she didn't pull out a badge or a phone. She pulled out a pair of reading glasses and slid them onto her nose. Then she opened the worn leather notebook. Are you deaf? Adrian barked, his patience snapping. Get out! Charlotte cleared her throat. Her voice was soft, but it carried a strange resonance, echoing off the glass walls. According to Article 4, Section 2 of the Ventura Holdings Corporate Charter. Charlotte read, a motion to remove a board member requires a supermajority of 75% of the voting shares, not just a show of hands. Adrian laughed, a harsh barking sound. I know the charter, Charlotte. I have the votes, and I have the shares. Between my holding and the board members here, we control 60% of the company. You have a measly... Charlotte looked up over the rim of her glasses. Correction, Adrian. You think you control 60%. What is that supposed to mean? It means, Charlotte said, closing the notebook with a soft thud, that you really should have read the fine print of the merger documents when you acquired Horizon Logistics last month. Adrian froze. Horizon Logistics was a shell company he had bought to hide some of the losses from the last quarter. It was his secret weapon to cook the books. How did she know about Horizon? That's confidential information, Adrian hissed. You're violating your NDA just by speaking about it. Horizon Logistics, Charlotte continued, her voice gaining strength, was a subsidiary of a holding trust based in Zurich, the VW Legacy Trust. She stood up. For the first time, she looked tall, imposing. Do you know what VW stands for, Adrian? Adrian's mouth went dry. VW, William Ventura. My father, Charlotte said, taking a step toward him. My father didn't just leave me the foundation. He knew men like you would come. He knew wolves would come sniffing around his legacy. So he created a blind trust. She reached into her notebook and pulled out a single folded piece of thick cream-colored paper. She slid it down the long mahogany table. It spun perfectly, stopping right in front of Old Man Henderson. Mr. Henderson, Charlotte said. Would you please read the beneficiary line of the VW Legacy Trust? Henderson picked up the paper. His hands were shaking slightly. He adjusted his spectacles. His eyes went wide. The sole beneficiary. Henderson's voice trembled with suppressed laughter. Is Charlotte Ventura Cross. And what assets does the trust hold? Charlotte asked. It holds. Henderson looked up, a grin splitting his face. It holds 51% of the Class A voting stock of Ventura Holdings, and it holds 100% of the ownership of Horizon Logistics. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had just landed, but hadn't detonated yet. Adrian felt the blood drain from his face. If the trust owned Horizon, and Horizon owned stock. You bought Horizon using company funds, Charlotte said, her voice like a whip. You effectively used my own money to buy more of my own company, Adrian. But because the trust owns Horizon, those shares don't belong to you. They belong to me. She looked around the room. I don't own 15%, Charlotte said. I own 66%. I am the majority shareholder. I am the board. Adrian stumbled back, gripping the back of his chair. That's a lie. That's forged. And as the majority shareholder, Charlotte said, her voice turning to ice, I have a few motions of my own. She looked at the door. You can come in now, Arthur. The double doors swung open. A tall, silver-haired man in a bespoke suit walked in, followed by 4 large men in dark tactical gear. It was Arthur Pendleton, the most feared corporate litigator in New York, and he was holding a briefcase that looked like it contained the end of the world. Arthur Pendleton didn't walk. He glided. He was a man who moved with the silent, predatory grace of a shark in deep water. He placed the heavy briefcase on the table, the metallic click of the latches echoing like gunshots in the silent boardroom. Mrs. Cross. Arthur said, his voice a smooth baritone that commanded immediate attention. The paperwork is in order. The transfer of the Horizon assets was finalized at 8:00 a.m. Zurich time. The filing with the SEC was completed 10 minutes ago. You have absolute control. Adrian's face had turned a shade of grey, usually reserved for corpses. He looked from the lawyer to his wife, his brain struggling to process the rapid shift in reality. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a strangled wheeze. This is ridiculous, Adrian stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Charlotte. You can't just walk in here with a piece of paper and claim you own the company. I am the CEO. I was appointed by the board. Charlotte stood up. She smoothed the front of her navy dress. The timid woman who had walked in 10 minutes ago was gone. In her place stood the daughter of William Ventura. You were appointed by a board that serves at the pleasure of the majority shareholder, Charlotte said calmly, and as of this moment, that board is dissolved. She looked around the table. The 7 members who had raised their hands to fire her were now shrinking into their leather chairs, terrified. Arthur, Charlotte said, without looking away from Adrian. Please read the first resolution of the new emergency shareholder meeting. Arthur pulled a document from the case. Resolution 1. The immediate termination of Adrian Cross from the position of Chief Executive Officer for cause. Specific citations include embezzlement, corporate espionage, and breach of fiduciary duty. Embezzlement, Sienna shrieked, finally finding her voice. She stood up, her crimson suit suddenly looking like a costume. That's a lie. Adrian is a genius. He saved this company. Charlotte turned her gaze to Sienna. It was a look of such profound pity that it silenced the other woman instantly. Sienna Blake, Charlotte said softly, Vice President of Marketing, or should I say, the owner of Blake Creative Solutions, a shell company that has billed Ventura Holdings for $3 million in consulting fees over the last 18 months, fees for work that was never performed. Sienna gasped, clutching her chest. I don't know what you're talking about. We have the bank records, Sienna, Arthur interjected pleasantly. We have the wire transfers from the company accounts to an offshore account in the Caymans registered in your name. And we have the emails between you and Adrian discussing how to hide the transactions. The boardroom erupted in whispers. Henderson, the old loyalist, looked at Adrian with pure disgust. You stole from us, Cross, after everything we gave you. Adrian slammed his fist on the table, his composure fracturing completely. It was my money, I earned it. I did the work while she played philanthropist. I deserve it. You deserve a prison cell, Charlotte said, her voice cutting through his shouting. And you will get one. The FBI is waiting in the lobby. They're very interested in your tax returns. Adrian's eyes darted to the door. He looked like a trapped rat. But before you go, Charlotte continued, there is a matter of company property. She gestured to the security guard standing by the door. Confiscate his phone, his laptop, and his keycard. Immediately. Two of the large men stepped forward. Adrian recoiled. Don't touch me. Do you know who I am? You are a trespasser, Charlotte said. One guard grabbed Adrian's arm, while the other expertly patted him down, removing his sleek company phone and his wallet. Adrian struggled, shouting profanities that echoed off the glass walls, stripping away the last veneer of his sophisticated persona. He was just a greedy, angry man in a suit he could no longer afford. Sienna tried to edge toward the door during the commotion. Sit down, Sienna, Charlotte commanded. She didn't shout, but the authority in her voice froze Sienna in her tracks. You aren't going to jail today. Sienna, Charlotte said, I'm not pressing charges against you. Yet. Sienna let out a breath of relief. Oh, thank God. Charlotte, listen, he made me do it. I was a victim here. Save it, Charlotte said coldly. I'm not sending you to jail because I want you to work. You're going to spend the next 10 years paying back every cent you stole. Arthur has prepared a civil lawsuit that will freeze your assets, seize your apartment, and garnish your future wages until the debt is paid. You will walk out of here with nothing. Sienna's face crumpled. She burst into tears, ugly and loud. Charlotte turned back to the board. Those of you who voted with him, she said, addressing the 7 traitors. Resignations will be on my desk by noon. If you resign, you keep your pensions. If you make me fire you, I will investigate every expense report you've filed in the last decade. Choose wisely. The 7 men and women nodded rapidly, unable to grab their pens fast enough. Finally, Charlotte looked at Adrian. The guards had him pinned by the arms. His tie was crooked, his hair messed up. He looked small. Get him out of my building, Charlotte said. This isn't over, Charlotte, Adrian screamed as they dragged him backward. You can't run this company. You're weak. You need me. You'll burn it to the ground. I'd rather burn it down than let you rule the ashes, Charlotte whispered. The doors slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The room fell into a heavy silence. Only the sound of Sienna's sobbing remained. Get her out too, Charlotte said to the remaining guards. And tell security to tow Adrian's Porsche. It's a company lease. As the room cleared, leaving only Charlotte, Arthur, and Henderson, the adrenaline that had been holding Charlotte up began to fade. Her knees shook. She sat down heavily in the chair Adrian had just vacated. Henderson stood up and walked over to her. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Your father would have been proud, Charlie, the old man said, his eyes misty. That was magnificent. Charlotte took a shaky breath. It's not over, Mr. Henderson. Adrian was right about one thing. He's hidden things, deep things. I need to find out how much damage he really did. Arthur opened his briefcase again. We have the forensic accountants standing by, but Charlotte, there is something else. Something we found in the Horizon files. Charlotte looked up, the fear returning. What? Adrian wasn't working alone, Arthur said grimly. Someone was feeding him inside information. Someone powerful. And they aren't going to be happy that you just cut their puppet strings. The executive suite of Ventura Holdings felt different with Charlotte behind the desk. For years, this room had smelled of Adrian's oppressive cologne and stale ambition. Now the windows were open, letting in the crisp Chicago air. But the atmosphere was far from relaxed. It had been 48 hours since the board meeting. The media was in a frenzy. Wife fires husband in billion-dollar boardroom coup was the headline on every business journal from New York to London. The stock had dipped initially, uncertain of the new leadership, but had stabilized when Charlotte announced a return to the company's core values of quality and integrity. But inside the office, the mood was grim. Charlotte sat surrounded by stacks of paper. Boxes of files that Adrian had kept hidden in a private safe were now spread across the oak desk. It's worse than we thought, Charlotte said, rubbing her temples. She looked exhausted. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Arthur Pendleton sat opposite her, nursing a black coffee. Define worse. He wasn't just skimming off the top, Charlotte said, picking up a document stamped confidential. He was selling us out. Look at this, Project Redline. Arthur took the file. His eyes scanned the pages and his eyebrows knit together. This is a liquidation plan. Exactly, Charlotte said. Adrian was deliberately driving the stock price down. He was sabotaging our R&D department, cancelling profitable contracts, and alienating our oldest partners. He was trying to make Ventura Holdings look like a sinking ship. To lower the acquisition price, Arthur realized. He was prepping the company for a hostile takeover. But for who? Charlotte spun her laptop around. On the screen was a blurry photograph taken by a private investigator 3 months ago. It showed Adrian shaking hands with a man on a tarmac next to a private jet. The man was tall, with silver hair, and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. Maximilian Stone, Charlotte said. The name tasted like poison. Arthur stiffened. The CEO of Titan Global, the most aggressive corporate raider in the world. If Stone is involved, this is a war, Charlotte. Titan Global doesn't buy companies. They devour them. They strip the assets, fire the workforce, and sell the scraps. Adrian had a deal with him, Charlotte explained. If Adrian tanked the stock enough for Titan to buy us out for pennies, Stone promised Adrian a $50 million payout and a seat on the Titan board. That explains the arrogance, Arthur muttered. He thought he had a golden parachute. Just then the intercom buzzed. Ms. Cross, Jessica's voice came through sounding nervous. There is a Mr. Stone on line 1. He says it's urgent. Charlotte and Arthur exchanged a look. The wolf was at the door. Put him through, Charlotte said, her voice steadying. She hit the speaker button. Mrs. Cross. Maximilian Stone's voice filled the room. It was deep-textured and terrifyingly calm. Or should I say the new CEO? Congratulations are in order, I suppose. Mr. Stone, Charlotte replied coolly. To what do I owe the pleasure? I assume you're not calling to offer your condolences on my pending divorce. Stone chuckled a dry, humorless sound. I like you, Charlotte. You have fire. Adrian described you as a mousy little philanthropist. He clearly underestimated you, a fatal error on his part. Adrian made many errors, Charlotte said, including thinking he could sell my father's legacy to a vulture like you. Harsh words, Stone said. But let's be practical. Adrian is gone. He was a blunt instrument and frankly a liability. But the reality of the market remains. Ventura Holdings is bleeding. You have debt, you have scandal, and you have a board in chaos. I am calling to make you a generous offer. Sell your controlling interest to Titan Global today, and I will let you keep the foundation. You can save your orphans, and I will take the business burden off your hands. And if I refuse... The line went silent for a moment. Charlotte, Stone said, his voice dropping an octave. You have played a good hand, but you are playing poker with a man who owns the casino. Adrian was just the first wave. If you fight me, I won't just buy your company. I will destroy it. I will bury you in litigation so deep you won't see the sun for a decade. I will ensure that the name Ventura is synonymous with bankruptcy. Charlotte looked at the portrait of her father hanging on the wall. She remembered the late nights he spent building this company, the families he supported, the pride he took in his work. Mr. Stone, Charlotte said, leaning into the microphone. You seem to be under the impression that I'm afraid of losing money. I'm not Adrian. I don't care about the golden parachute. I care about the legacy. So bring your lawyers, bring your raiders. But know this, if you come for my company, you better bring more than threats, because I am not selling a single share. She slammed the phone down, disconnecting the call. Her hand was trembling again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was rage. Arthur let out a low whistle. Well, you just declared war on the biggest predator on Wall Street. He was going to attack anyway, Charlotte said. At least now he knows I'm armed. We need allies, Arthur said, standing up and pacing. Titan is too big to fight alone. We need capital to stabilize the stock price before Stone starts his attack. We need a white knight. I might know someone, Charlotte said thoughtfully. She reached into her drawer and pulled out an old business card. It was thick cardstock, embossed with simple black lettering, Oakhaven Capital. Lucas Sterling. Arthur read the name. The tech investor, he's a recluse. No one has seen him in public in 5 years. We went to university together, Charlotte said, before I met Adrian, before he disappeared into his billions. He hated bullies, and he hated Maximilian Stone. It's a long shot, Arthur warned. It's the only shot we have, Charlotte replied. Meanwhile, across the city, inside a dim holding cell at the first precinct, Adrian Cross sat on a metal bench. His suit was wrinkled, his tie confiscated. The smell of urine and bleach stung his nose. He had used his one phone call to call his lawyer, but he hadn't called a defense attorney. He had called a number he had memorized years ago. A guard walked up to the bars. "Cross, you made bail. Someone posted it." Adrian looked up, confused. "Who my assets are frozen." "Anonymous," the guard grunted, unlocking the cell. "There's a car waiting for you out back." Adrian walked out of the precinct into the blinding afternoon sun. A black limousine was idling at the curb. The back window rolled down halfway. Maximilian Stone sat in the shadows of the car. He didn't look at Adrian. He looked straight ahead. "Get in," Stone said. Adrian scrambled into the car, relief washing over him. "Max, thank God. She ambushed me. But I can fix it. I know where the bodies are buried. I know her weak spots." Stone turned slowly to look at Adrian. His eyes were cold and dead. You failed, Adrian. I don't tolerate failure. I didn't fail, Adrian pleaded. I just need time. She's incompetent. She'll make a mistake. She already made a mistake, Stone said, a cruel smile touching his lips. She let you live, which means you are still useful to me. Not as a CEO, but as a weapon. Stone handed Adrian a folder. Inside were photos, not of the company, but of Charlotte. Photos of her coming and going from her apartment. Photos of her visiting her elderly mother in the care home. You want your money, Adrian? Stone asked. You want your revenge? Then you are going to help me break her. Not financially, psychologically. Adrian looked at the photos. A dark, twisted hatred curled in his gut. He had loved the power Charlotte gave him. Now that she had taken it away, he wanted to see her suffer. What do I have to do? Adrian asked. Get back inside, Stone said. Not the building. Her head. Make her think she's losing her mind. And while she is distracted fighting ghosts, I will take the crown. The limo sped off into the city, carrying two monsters who were ready to burn everything down to get what they wanted. The residence of Lucas Sterling was not a house. It was a fortress of solitude buried deep within the wooded hills of upstate New York. A modern structure of concrete and glass, it cantilevered over a rushing river isolated from the world. It was the home of a man who had made billions in tech and then vanished disgusted by the noise of the world. Charlotte's car crunched over the gravel driveway. The rain was coming down in sheets, matching the turmoil inside her. She hadn't seen Lucas in 7 years. They had been close once intellectual sparring partners at university, until Adrian had swept in with his charm and isolated her from everyone who truly knew her. She was met at the heavy steel door by a silent security guard who scanned her ID before ushering her into a vast, minimalist living room. Lucas Sterling stood by the floor-to-ceiling window watching the storm. He hadn't changed much. He was still lean, wearing a simple black sweater, his eyes sharp and observant behind wire-rimmed glasses. You look like you've been through a war, Charlie, Lucas said, not turning around. I started one, Charlotte corrected, shaking the rain from her coat. I assume you've seen the news. Lucas turned. I don't watch the news, but my algorithms track market volatility. Ventura Holdings is lighting up the boards like a Christmas tree. Maximilian Stone is circling. He's not just circling, he's sieging, Charlotte said, walking over to the fireplace to warm her hands. He wants to strip the company for parts. He's working with Adrian. Lucas raised an eyebrow. The husband you just publicly executed. That's a dangerous combination. Desperation and malice. I need a bulwark, Lucas, Charlotte said, meeting his gaze. I need an investor with deep pockets who isn't afraid of Titan Global. Someone who believes in long-term value, not just quarterly stripping. I need you to buy the 20% float that's currently being dumped by panicked retail investors. Lucas poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He handed one to her. You're asking me to step into the ring with the biggest bully on Wall Street. For what sentimental attachment to your father's company? Because it's a good company, Charlotte insisted. It's profitable. It supports 3,000 families. And because... She hesitated. Because I let a monster run it for 3 years while I slept. I need to fix it. Lucas studied her for a long moment. He saw the steel in her spine that hadn't been there 7 years ago. I'll do it, Lucas said. On one condition. Name it. Total transparency. If Stone is involved, he plays dirty. If you have skeletons, tell me now. Because he will find them. Charlotte nodded. No skeletons. Just Adrian. Charlotte returned to Chicago late that night. The city lights were a blur against the rain-streaked window of her town car. She felt a glimmer of hope. With Lucas Sterling backing the Stockstones' hostile takeover attempt, would stall. She arrived at the Ventura Tower at 11:00 p.m. The building was empty, save for the cleaning crews and security. She took the private elevator up to the penthouse office. She needed to prepare the press release announcing the strategic partnership with Oakhaven Capital. The elevator doors slid open. The executive floor was dark, silent. Charlotte walked to her office, unlocking the heavy glass door with her keycard. She stepped inside and flipped the light switch. She froze. Her desk, usually organized with military precision, was cluttered. A single red rose lay in the center of the blotter. Charlotte's heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't ordered flowers. And security logs showed no one had entered the suite. She walked slowly toward the desk. Next to the rose was a small silver music box. It was old, tarnished. Charlotte gasped. It was her mother's music box. It had been lost for years. Adrian had told her it was lost during their move to the penthouse. He said the movers had stolen it. With trembling fingers, she opened the lid. The tinny, eerie melody of Clair de Lune filled the silent office. Taped to the inside of the lid was a small Polaroid photo. It was a picture of Charlotte taken today. It showed her getting into her car outside Lucas Sterling's estate. The angle was from the bushes. Someone had been watching her. The phone on her desk suddenly rang. The shrill sound made her jump, knocking the music box to the floor. It played on distorted now, face down on the carpet. She stared at the phone. It was the internal line. But no one was in the building. She picked it up slowly. "Hello. Did you have a nice trip to the country, darling?" The voice was warped, digitally altered, but the cadence was unmistakable. It was Adrian. "How did you get in here?" Charlotte whispered, spinning around, checking the shadows of the room. "I changed the codes. I changed the locks." "You can change the locks, Charlotte," the voice purred. "But you can't change the past. You think you're safe because you fired me. I built the security system in that tower. I know every blind spot, every backdoor code." "I'm calling the police," Charlotte said, reaching for her mobile. "Go ahead," Adrian laughed. "By the time they get there, I'll be gone. And they'll just see a stressed-out woman imagining things. There's no one on the security tapes, Charlotte. I made sure of that. You're going crazy, just like your aunt did." "Remember." Charlotte gripped the desk. Her aunt had been institutionalized for paranoia. It was a deep family fear. Adrian knew that. He was weaponizing her own history against her. "You're trying to gaslight me," Charlotte said, her voice shaking but defiant. "It won't work." "Won't it?" Adrian asked. "Check your email, Charlie. Sent items." Charlotte looked at her laptop screen. It was glowing. She clicked on her Sent folder. At 10:45 p.m., 15 minutes ago, when she was in the car, an email had been sent from her account to the entire board of directors. Subject: resignation. Body: "I can't take the pressure. I'm seeing things. The walls are closing in. I quit." "No," Charlotte breathed. "I didn't write this." "Recall it," Adrian taunted. "Try to explain it. Tell them you were hacked. But you know what they'll think. They'll think the Ice Queen is cracking. Stone will have a field day with this." "Stop it, Adrian," she screamed into the empty room. "This is just the beginning," the voice hissed. "Sleep tight, wife." The line went dead. Charlotte stood in the center of her office, the silence pressing in on her. The music box lay on the floor, the gears finally winding down. Claire de Lune slowed to a stop. She wasn't just fighting for her company anymore. She was fighting for her sanity. The next morning, the sun rose over a city that smelled of wet pavement and scandal. Charlotte hadn't slept. She had spent the night with the IT department, scrubbing the unauthorized email and issuing a retraction claiming a phishing attack. But the damage was done. Screenshots of the resignation email had been leaked to the press. The headlines were brutal. Ventura CEO meltdown bizarre. Late night email. Sparks board. Panic. Is Charlotte Cross fit to lead? At 9:00 a.m. Maximilian Stone went on CNBC. He sat comfortably in a studio chair, looking like a concerned statesman. "It's a tragedy," Stone said to the camera, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "We all know the Ventura family has a history of mental fragility. It seems the pressure of the transition has broken poor Charlotte. For the sake of the shareholders and for her own health, Titan Global is renewing our offer to purchase the company. We need stable hands at the wheel." Charlotte watched the broadcast from the conference room. Lucas Sterling was on a video link from his estate. Arthur Pendleton was pacing the room. "He's painting you as hysterical," Arthur said, furious. "It's a classic misogynistic trope, but it's effective. The stock is down another 8% this morning. The board is getting calls from major pension funds asking if you're mentally competent." "We need to strike back," Lucas's voice came over the speakers. "My buy order is holding the line at $40 a share, but I can't hold it forever if the market loses faith in the CEO." Charlotte stared at the screen. She looked pale, dark circles under her eyes, but her hands were steady. "Adrian is doing this," she said. "He's feeding Stone the narrative. He's using his knowledge of the IT infrastructure to plant evidence." "We need proof," Arthur said. "Real proof. Not just a spooky phone call." "He said he knows the blind spots," Charlotte murmured, remembering the call. "He said he built the system." She stood up suddenly. "Arthur, get the blueprints of the office renovation, the one Adrian authorized 2 years ago." 10 minutes later, they had the schematics spread out on the table. Charlotte traced the wiring diagrams. "Here," she pointed. "In my office, there's a vent above the bookshelf. On the schematic, it's marked as HVAC return. But look at the wiring. That's not a power cable for a fan. That's a Cat6 data cable." A hard line, Lucas realized from the screen. He didn't trust Wi-Fi. He hardwired a surveillance device directly into the building's network. "If it's hardwired," Charlotte said, "it's transmitting somewhere, not to the cloud, to a physical server." "Where?" Arthur asked. "Adrian is a creature of habit," Charlotte said, her eyes narrowing. "When we were first married, he rented a small storage unit in the industrial district. He said it was for his old tax records. He never let me go there." She looked at Arthur. "We're going hunting." 2 hours later, Arthur Pendleton and a team of private security contractors stood in front of a rusty roll-up door at You Store It on the outskirts of Chicago. They had a warrant expedited by a judge who owed Arthur a favor. They cut the lock. The door rolled up with a screech. Inside, there were no tax records. It was a high-tech command center. Banks of servers hummed in the cool air, powered by an illegal tap into the main grid. On the wall was a massive monitor wall. It showed live feeds. Charlotte's office, the boardroom, the hallway of her apartment, even the interior of her car. "My God," Arthur whispered, taking photos with his phone. "He's been watching everything." For years. Sitting on a desk in the center of the room was a laptop. Arthur put on latex gloves and opened it. It was logged in. "We have him," Arthur said into his headset to Charlotte. "We have the spoofing software he used to send the email. We have the deepfake audio tools he used to call you. And we have logs of encrypted chats with Maximilian Stone." Back at the tower, Charlotte listened, a cold satisfaction settling over her. "Don't shut it down," Charlotte ordered. "What?" Arthur asked, surprised. "If we shut it down, he'll know we found it," Charlotte said. "He's watching me right now, isn't he?" "Yes," Arthur confirmed. "Camera 3, you're in the conference room." Charlotte looked directly at the smoke detector on the ceiling of the conference room. She knew he was behind it. "He wants a show," Charlotte said. "Let's give him one. Lucas, are you still on the line?" "I'm here," Lucas said. "I have a plan," Charlotte said. "It's risky, but it will bury both of them." That afternoon, the leak came from inside Ventura Holdings. A secret recording of Charlotte Cross screaming at her lawyer was released to TMZ. In the audio, Charlotte sounded unhinged. "I don't care about the laws." Arthur Byrne. "The documents. If Stone gets hold of the Horizon files, I'm going to prison. I did it. I stole the money." The media went wild. This was the smoking gun. Charlotte Cross was not just incompetent. She was a criminal. She had just admitted to the very embezzlement she accused her husband of. In the storage unit, Adrian watched the newsfeed on his monitor wall, a bag of chips in his hand. He laughed, a high, manic sound. "Got you." He grinned. He picked up his burner phone and called Stone. "Did you hear it?" Adrian asked. "I heard it," Stone said, sounding triumphant. "The stock is in free fall. It's down 20%. Trading has been halted. This is it, Adrian. The board has called an emergency meeting for 6:00 p.m. They're going to remove her. I'll buy the controlling stake by morning." "And my payment?" Adrian asked. "Meet me at the airfield at 7:00 p.m., Stone said. "Your jet is waiting, along with your money." Adrian hung up. He felt like a king. He grabbed his jacket. He had one last stop to make. He wanted to go to the board meeting. He wanted to see the look on Charlotte's face when they dragged her out. The boardroom at 6:00 p.m. was packed. Every seat was taken. The air was thick with tension. Charlotte sat at the head of the table. She looked defeated. Her head was in her hands. The door opened. Adrian Cross walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was fired, banned, but the security guards, confused by the chaos of the day, hadn't stopped him. Or maybe they had been paid off. "Well, well," Adrian announced, strutting into the room. "The Queen is dead. Long live the King." He looked at the board members. "I told you. I told you she was unstable. I told you she was the thief. That recording proves it." Old Man Henderson looked at Adrian with a strange expression. It wasn't fear. It was anticipation. "Charlotte," Adrian mocked. "Cat got your tongue." Charlotte slowly lifted her head. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She was smiling. "Hello, Adrian," she said clearly. "I'm glad you could make it. We were just waiting for the guest of honor." "What is this?" Adrian frowned. "You're finished. The recording was scripted," Charlotte said. She tapped a remote control. The large screen behind her flickered to life. But it didn't show stock prices. It showed the interior of the storage unit. It showed Adrian sitting in the chair 2 hours ago, eating chips, laughing. It showed him dialing the phone. And then the audio played. Not the deep fake audio of Charlotte, but the audio from the bug Arthur had planted in the storage unit after they raided it. Adrian's voice on the recording. "I heard it. The stock is in free fall. This is it, Adrian. They're going to remove her. And my payment. Meet me at the airfield. Your jet is waiting. The colour drained from Adrian's face so fast, he looked like he might faint. You see, Charlotte said, standing up. We found your little spy nest this morning, but we didn't turn it off. We used it to feed you exactly what you wanted to hear. We staged that argument for your benefit. We knew you would record it and leak it to Stone. We needed to prove the conspiracy. She pointed to the screen. And you just gave us the confession. Conspiracy to commit securities fraud, market manipulation, illegal surveillance, and collusion with a hostile entity. The doors to the boardroom opened again. This time it wasn't security guards. It was the FBI. Adrian Cross, the lead agent said, stepping forward with handcuffs. You are under arrest. Adrian backed away, bumping into the table. No. No Stone made me do it. Mr. Stone is currently being detained at the airfield, the agent said. We picked him up 10 minutes ago. Adrian looked at Charlotte. His eyes were wide, pleading. Charlie, please, I'm your husband. Charlotte looked at him, her face like stone. You fired your wife, Adrian, she said softly. Now I'm evicting my husband. As they dragged him away, kicking and screaming, Charlotte turned to the camera lens in the corner of the room, the one Adrian had installed, and gave a small, cold wave. Then she looked at the board. Now, Charlotte said, adjusting her blazer. Shall we discuss the acquisition of Titan Global? I believe their stock price is about to crash. The silence that followed the FBI's departure was heavier than the chaos that had preceded it. The boardroom doors were closed, and Adrian Cross was gone. The man who had ruled by fear had been dismantled in less than 10 minutes. Charlotte Cross stood at the head of the table looking down at the empty chair. She felt the heavy, solemn weight of responsibility. She had cut out the cancer, but the patient Ventura Holdings was still on the operating table. Mrs. Cross, Henderson asked tentatively, what happens now? Charlotte turned to the screen, where Lucas Sterling was watching via video link. Now, she said, her voice ringing with authority. We go on the offensive. Arthur Status on Titan Global. News of Maximilian Stone's arrest has hit the wire, Arthur said, checking his tablet with a grim smile. Titan Global is in freefall, down 40% in after-hours trading. Perfect, Charlotte said. Lucas released the funds. She looked at her board, the survivors. For years, Titan Global has been the predator. They tried to eat us. They failed. I am proposing a motion for a hostile takeover of Titan Global. We buy the controlling interest at the depressed rate and restructure them under the Ventura banner. The board gasped, the prey eating the predator. All in favor? Charlotte asked. Every hand went up. Even the traitors raised their hands, desperate to prove their loyalty to the new queen. 3 months later, the visitation room at the Cook County Correctional Facility was stark and grey. Adrian Cross sat behind the thick plexiglass. He looked ruined hair, thinning skin sallow, the orange jumpsuit hanging loosely on his frame. He had lost everything. Charlotte sat on the visitor's side, pristine in a white cashmere coat. She slid a thick envelope into the metal drawer. Divorce papers, Adrian asked, his voice a bitter rasp. And the termination of your parental rights, Charlotte added softly. Adrian froze. We don't have children. We had embryos, Charlotte corrected. Frozen 3 years ago. Given your conviction, the judge granted me sole custody of the genetic material. I had them destroyed this morning, Adrian. There will be no legacy for you. It ends here. Adrian slammed his fist against the glass, tears of rage welling in his eyes. "You can't do that, I made you. You were nothing before me." "I was a Ventura," Charlotte said, standing up. "And you were a mistake I have finally corrected. The irony is, Adrian, if you had just been honest, if you had just asked for the power, I might have given it to you. I didn't want the throne. I just wanted a husband. But you had to steal what was already yours." "Charlotte." "Help me," he screamed as she turned her back. She walked on out of the heavy steel doors into the blinding sunlight. A silver sedan was waiting at the curb. Lucas Sterling was behind the wheel. Charlotte got into the passenger seat, taking a deep breath of fresh air. "Done?" Lucas asked. "Done," Charlotte said. "The merger is finalized." Lucas smiled as he pulled onto the highway. Ventura Titan stocks are up 15%. The market loves the redemption arc. "Where to the tower?" Charlotte looked out the window at the skyline, leaving the ghost of Adrian Cross behind. "No." She smiled, placing a hand on his arm. "Let's go to the river. Sir, I need some quiet." The car sped up, driving toward a future that finally belonged to her. So that is the story of Charlotte Cross, the woman who was underestimated, undervalued, and publicly humiliated by the person who was supposed to protect her. Adrian thought that power came from shouting the loudest. He didn't realize that true power lies in patience and knowing exactly when to play your ace. He fired his wife in front of the board, thinking he was ending her career, but all he did was sign his own death warrant. In the end, the quiet philanthropist didn't just take back her company. She conquered his, destroyed his legacy, and left him with nothing but a view of the world he used to rule from behind a pane of glass. If you enjoyed this story of corporate revenge and sweet justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were in Charlotte's shoes? Would you have forgiven Adrian, or would you have destroyed him just like she did? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new episode. Thanks for watching.